Hey everyone, thanks for joining a very special Diwali stream for GMAT Club. We're talking about GMAT Focus today, and we tried to get some experts and some non-experts who took the GMAT Focus very recently as last night, to talk about what changed in the test, how our experiences were while taking the test, and what advice we might have for people who are thinking about taking the test in the recent future. My name is Souvik. I've been on a bunch of these streams in the past. I don't really need to introduce myself, but this thing, the only special thing that I would say was last night's GMAT was my seventh attempt at the GMAT. So I only have like one left, which does make me a little bit sad. But I learned a lot. I learned a ton from last night's test, and I'm really excited to share that. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Ryan. Who are you, and why did you take the GMAT Focus?
I am Ryan Starr. I'm an instructor in Manhattan Prep, and a long time ago, Kaplan. I've been teaching the GMAT for almost 20 years, and I took the focus just because I was excited that there was finally a new test. And of course, we have to stay on top of the tests pretty frequently, but it was only my fourth time taking a real GMAT, and obviously my first time taking a focus. I took it on Tuesday because I was excited the new test was coming out, and I took it as blind as I possibly could. I do not recommend that. More on that later.
Awesome. I took it super blind as well. I do not recommend that either. But I have like, I think I made more mistakes than you, Ryan. But Ajitesh, walk us through who you are.
Right. So my name is Ajitesh. I have worked with big test prep companies in the past, but nowadays I'm a GMAT tutor, independent. And what I'm really working on now is providing free concept theory videos to pretty much everyone that I can. So that's what I'm really excited about these days. As far as the GMAT focus is concerned, I took it on the 7th itself. I went looking for the first appointment I could find, and I took it as soon as I could. So, as Ryan said, I was excited for it, but equally importantly, it is very important for instructors to be able to guide their students, and I just had to take the GMAT for that.
Awesome. Naveen, you're in a very special place, a place that I really enjoy and visit at least twice a year. Walk us through who you are.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Happy Diwali to everyone. So, I'm Naveen Kumar Singh. I'm working as a manager at the Reserve Bank of India. So, I took the GMAT Focus Edition on 7th of November itself, the first slot. And so I'm not an instructor. I just want to get into a B school. And so, yeah, so this was my second attempt. I took the classic GMAT on 16th of October, and without much preparation, I thought that it is just a test of your aptitude, which it is not. You have to prepare. So I got just 650 in my classic GMAT, and then I thought of different things what I should do. Then I focused that I should prepare for the GMAT focus exam. So more on why I chose this probably later. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no. You're at the Mumbai airport. Sorry, no, I just wanted to spoil that. I hope you didn't take the GMAT Focus in the Mumbai airport because they were vigilant about my room that I took the test in. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Just full disclosure, I'm not an instructor either. I just take the test for fun. I really love the test, and I think the test is getting increasingly harder to love. Okay, so I'm just going to start talking about the big changes in the test. So we're going to go a little bit, really quick round robin, right? So I went into the test just like you, Ryan. I had no idea about the changes. I just knew that there wouldn't be any sentence correction questions. And I was very sad about that. I was very sad about not having sentence correction because those are the questions that I take the least time in. I feel
Yeah,
like
me
that's
too.
the easiest to improve. You learn a couple of, I mean, sure, it's not just about rules, but I feel like going from 0 to 50 in sentence correction is very quick, very easy. 50 to 100, of course, is like pretty difficult. So that was one big change that I observed and I was sad about. In the problem solving section, I didn't see data sufficiency. So I thought, oh, they got rid of data sufficiency. That's not a terrible thing because those do take time for me. but then they showed up in the DI section, so
Yeah.
I wasn't very sure about that as well. And the other rumor that I heard was there would be no geometry questions. So, and I didn't see any geometry questions in the problem solving section of the test, but I did see an abundance of rate, time, and work questions. I think I saw like at least five of them in my test. Maybe that was just me,
Oh,
but
same.
right. So those
Yeah.
were some high level changes. The one other change that I saw was the review section that I never saw in the GMAT before, and I don't really know what it means for the adaptivity of the test. I have no idea what that means because GMAT was always like question by question adaptive. For like us ancient people who have taken the test since like a long time. So being able to go back to some of the questions I've done before, and I know for a fact that I made a mistake in one of the questions and I corrected that question, but I don't know what that means to my final scoring because does that mean the difficulty levels did not change? So Ajitesh, I'm curious, what were the big rock changes that you saw on the test compared to the tests that you have taken before?
So I think the biggest thing for me is that the verbal section didn't really change much. I thought maybe they'd have some new questions, and I'm pretty sure they made a lot of new questions for this exam. But in terms of question difficulty and in terms of what the questions just feel like, I don't think I saw too much of a difference.
That's right. I didn't see a lot of it in the verbal question either. Ryan, what about you? What were some of the big changes that you saw?
I agree about the verbal section. The critical reasoning and reading comprehension that were there felt the same as before. To your point, actually, I did use the go back feature on the verbal section myself because, and this is not something I'm proud to admit, but I started dozing off during one of the passages and I was like stuck on this question. And every time I tried to go through the answers, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put in an answer and come back to it later. And that's exactly what I did. And I ended up changing it later too. And to whether the like trajectory changes or not, I can't really say. I can say that I went back, I changed that answer to what I think was the right answer, and I got an 89 out of 90 in verbal. So either I missed a verbal question along the way, totally possible, or I got them right, but because I had missed that one originally, it put me on a bit of a different trajectory, and there's no changing that trajectory after that, as best we've got it figured. But I think we're all still trying to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, I think that is the most interesting bit to me. Like, how do you go back to the trajectory and still make some positive choices? So, but before we jump into some of the personal experiences, Naveen, you took the classic GMAT. Are we calling it the classic GMAT? Or and then you immediately took the focus. How did you see the test change?
Uh, Not much change. I mean, the problem solving section in the classic GMAT, if we can call it that, that and the quant section, the question difficulty level was almost the same, except that there was no data sufficiency and there was no geometry questions. And similar to Ajitesh experience, I also didn't feel that the verbal section had any uh, major changes. I don't think there was any change. Those questions could have been in the classic GMAT. Right. So why I took so your question was why I took the GMAT focus after taking the classic GMAT, right? So
I mean, yes, but
my main
also what were some of the changes that you did see?
what I personally saw was the adaptiveness was not so steep. That's what
Hmm.
that's what I thought. Because in the classic GMAT, the adaptiveness was very steep. Okay, like every you do one question correct, the other question was definitely tough. Other question was even more tough.
Yeah.
I did not see that thing happening in the GMAT focus, and I don't know whether GMAT has given any comments on that about adaptiveness.
No.
There is a lot of confusion regarding this. That some are saying on the GMAT Club forum that it is section-wise adaptive, but I don't think it is section-wise adaptive. It is mostly question-wise adaptive. There is some adaptiveness, but it's not so steep as the classic GMAT.
That is interesting. I think there used to be a time when I would just try to like really try to understand what is the rate of change of difficulty of a question based on your attempts. And then I kind of like abandoned that pursuit just because experimental questions exist, right? And the other thing is, I remember during one of my many attempts, I was very sure that I was really bombing the quant section because in the middle of the quant section, I got like a question that was just like expanding the sum of the square of a sum, right? It was super easy. Like, what? This is the easiest question ever. It's very obvious that I'm doing very poorly. I ended up getting a pretty strong quant score. So I'm gonna move to personal experience, and I have a fair bit to say here. My verbal section felt very steep adaptively. It felt very difficult. So especially RC, like super dense passages, and again, like nothing that I wouldn't see in the regular GMAT. I was just like, can you just give me one reading comprehension passage where I don't want to like bang my head into the wall? So it felt difficult. However, I made, and this is what I wanted to chat about as my biggest change and biggest annoyance with the test. I ended up getting a 655, which I think equates to a 710, 720. So when I got the first score, and again, I haven't gotten the score breakdown yet because it was just that last night was my test. So when I first saw 655, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I have gotten dumber since like not doing the test for a very long time. But then I kind of realized something super interesting. My quant, I only got the percentiles, not the scores. So my quant percentile was 92, which I think equates to a Q50 in the classic areas. My verbal percentile was 98, which I think could be a 44, 45 kind of a thing. So those two things combined should give me a 760-ish score. My DI was 58 percentile. I was like, okay, I may not be that good at DI, but I'm not terrible either. And then I realized that and after the test, I was talking to a friend. In my last, I was kind of sort of running out of time in DI, right? And my last question, I had like maybe a minute left, right? So traditional wisdom for the test was like you mark the options and then you think about it, right? So that even the time runs out, your attempt still counts. I learned that it's not the same now. You actually have to press next, otherwise it doesn't count. And my time ran out, and I thought it did count, and I have a very sneaky suspicion that it didn't count, and that was a huge penalty for my DI score, which I was really bummed about. So that was something that, like, I made a mistake. I don't know what would have happened if I actually marked, guessed, and moved on and clicked next. But I was really, really annoyed by that, that they made this big change of like, you have to submit the answer to your last question. But that was like my breakdown, and that was what happened with me. So I'm curious, Naveen, what was your personal experience taking the GMAT focus?
Well, I had this same experience, but not in the exam, in one of my mocks. That in one of my mocks, I used the review answer thing, and the time ran out. I changed my answer, but I did not click next. So ultimately, it didn't change my answer. So, and another thing that I note was, uh, if you do a question wrong, you are penalized less. But if you leave a question, I think it's like double the penalty. That's what I thought in my scores. In one of my mocks, wherever I left some questions, I was heavily penalized. So the experience was similar to Souvik's. And yeah, so this review facility is very good. I mean, I used it in all the three sections. I used this facility. In fact, in quant, I was left with around 15 minutes
Same.
after I did one round of the questions. And after that, I began scrolling from 21st question. And I found out that my sixth question, there was some problem in my sixth question. So I changed the answer. And so this review is a lifesaver. And one should use it. One should strategize how to go about it, especially in DI. This suppose if you are able to suppose like in MSR, okay, multi-source reasoning, it takes a lot of time, and you can be wise and just mark the answers and go about your business in DI, because a lot of easy questions are there at the back. There are some simple graph table, some simple
Yeah,
DS questions, and then you can come back to MSR and change those three answers. So you need to now take this into your strategy, how to use
yeah.
this VB facility.
That's actually a really good insight. I did feel like a bunch of I forget that they were called MSR. Like a bunch of questions where we had like three different tabs and four different questions. And like, oh, am I seriously gonna have to read all of these three tabs? But that's actually a great insight. Just bookmark them and move on. Do the easy ones first, and then come back to them. That's because sometimes I saw like those two tabs thingies, but with only one question, felt unreasonable to have to spend so much time just for one question. So, Ryan, how did your personal experience? How was that for taking the test and versus your previous attempts? Sorry, before we go to that, Naveen, walk us through the score that you got. Just want to celebrate. I know how much you got.
So I got Q9. My overall score was 695, which I think is around 750 in the classic GMAT regime. My quant score was 90. My verbal was 82, which is 79 percentile. And my DI was 82, which is 94 percentile. And quant was 100 percentile, 90.
That's amazing.
Overall, it
Congratulations.
was 98 percentile. Thanks, thanks.
Amazing. Ryan, over to you.
Yeah, I'll echo what a lot of you have said. I saw about four or so race problems in my quant section, and I agree. I didn't feel it getting as steeply hard as I've been noticing on classic GMATs that I've taken over the last couple of years. The rate problems I was getting toward the end of the math section were about as difficult as the rate problems I was getting as like number two and number three and things like that. So I kind of agree with that. Verbal, again, I think we've said what we need to say about verbal. I agree with what everybody said. Data insights was the really hard section for me. I had worked on some data sufficiency questions, like logic type data sufficiency questions for the company to make some imitation questions so we could have some on practice tests and things like that. And I expected data sufficiency to be a bit like that now because again I was going into it fairly blind, but the data sufficiency questions I got were a lot of statistics, like a lot of averages, medians, set theory and stuff like that, and not so much just like pure logic as it were. And so my experience ended up being in data insights. I was running out of time, and actually, like you, Souvik, I was on the last question. I put in an answer. I was like, I gotta rush because I never really was sure about this whole if I mark it, it should count thing. I've been seeing kind of weird things on the EA lately, and so I decided I should really get this in. But it was a total guess, and I was hoping to get an educated guess. And like right when the pop up came with, "Are you sure you want to confirm?" ran out of time. So my DI experience was also running out of time.
Oh, so
Yeah.
so you did not hit submit or next to your
I
last
hit
one?
I hit next, and then the pop-up comes saying, "Are you sure?" Because you hit next, and then you have to confirm. And when I was going to confirm, out of time.
Ah,
So yeah, so I got 83 as my DI score, which was 96th percentile, just I
oh,
think one
so
point
it
above you,
probably
Naveen.
counted. You probably did really well.
There's a chance that it counted, but I know I was like even on the last couple of questions, I was having to rush because I was very much running out
Yeah,
of time. It's a hard section for me to finish, and even the IR section on the executive assessment has been historically a bit hard for me to finish. But the addition of
yeah,
this weird data sufficiency that I was kind of thrown off balance by, that's what really did it. So yeah, I
right.
got 83, 96th percentile on that, but then 90 on quant and 89. And both were 100th percentile on quant and verbal. 90 on quant and 89 on verbal for a
Gotcha, gotcha. That's a
set.
that's a really amazing score. I'm just really annoyed that I didn't press the next button,
Yeah.
and now I almost want to take the test again. But I also know the GMAT will do something astronomical in the next 2 3 years. So could I save my attempt for that? So I think that's very reasonable, and it has been my experience as well. One of the things that I noticed because you mentioned set theory, a lot of my DS was also based on three different sets, merge them together. If this average changes, what happens to this, and things like that. And some of them were pretty hard, and some of them were. I would say that I could expect to see a question like that in the traditional GMAT. but it did feel fairly tricky. I think one of my friends mentioned that there is like verbal DI questions now, which I was like, okay, what is that? But I didn't really see any of those. I did see some logic based DI questions, but I would expect them in classic GMAT too. Like I wouldn't be too bothered if they showed up in the classic GMAT. Like they did not seem to me like a brand new category of questions. Also, I think one thing that I wanted to call out that I did not miss the AWA. That always seemed to me like a pretty big waste of time for me, but I did not miss it. Although it could be a good time to just catch a breath and like take a break. Ajitesh, how was your personal experience taking the test?
So I started off with quant, and I was struggling with quant. So right off the bat, I was struggling with time management. I was overusing the bookmark feature, so I was bookmarking questions, more questions than I could possibly review and edit. So that was an issue. And I think at the end of quant, I was left with very little time. So I was left with around 4 minutes. And I think I did not use my time properly. So I should have solved maybe one or two questions properly, but I just kept on switching between questions. And I think I could have done better in quant. And just so that everyone knows, my quant score was 83, which is an 81 percentile, right? So yeah. So after that, I was not planning to take a break, but I had to take a break because I let the screen time out. And then I got started on DI. I was not expecting this. So I've taken the GMAT 3 times before. I've taken IR twice, and I've never got a question wrong. Never had a problem with time management. I didn't expect this. I got a very heavy MSR, and analyzing my test now, I can answer some of the questions that people in the chat might have. So just to be clear, out of my 20 DI questions, 11 were math related, 9 were non-math. And this is direct from whatever the GMAC is saying. This is from the ESR. I got a total of 8 DS questions, of which 3 were non-math related. So that's, you can, I don't think you have a place to practice those questions from, but you can get an idea about what the GMAT is aiming for over here.
Hmm.
I did end up with a little bit of time left in DS, but not enough to review. I was actually looking forward to getting to verbal, so I just hit continue test, and I got to the verbal section, and and I think the verbal section felt good. So in terms of it was familiar, so it was similar to what we've done before, and I think that was a good thing if you prepared for the test.
Right. Yeah, I think that experience coincides with me. GI felt especially time consuming. I will say though that the non-math DS thing, I think I don't know what I think about this as a concept because I never saw the GMAT quant section as a math section or the verbal section as like the English section. Like they always felt to me like logic and reasoning, and I did not really think that the non-math questions in DS was, were needing entirely different skill sets. I think they felt pretty similar to me. But at the same time, to your point, Ajitesh, like it would be nice to have some examples of those in our practice materials or practice questions. Ryan and Ajitesh, what were your other? Ryan, what was your net score in the uh, focus? Because somebody's asking.
Um, Two things. Okay, my net score was 755. So I got quant 90, verbal 89, DI 83, and that translated to 755. And I just wanted to say really quickly about the non-math DS. So that was the only kind of sample question I'd seen because as I said, we at the company were like making some imitation problems and we'd gotten this group of official non-quant DS questions. And what they felt like was mini like LSAT logic games, just like some conditions, like two people, there's one I remember, two people were planning a trip and they had these requirements, like this person only wanted to go here, here, this person only wanted to go somewhere they hadn't been before. And then the statements were about, okay, this person has also never been here before, or
Right.
something like that. So very non-math DS, but I didn't see any like that show up on my actual exam, for what it's worth.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think until like the changes are a little bit more explicit, I wouldn't really go. This is just my advice because you're heading into that section where we sort of like give advice to people. I wouldn't worry about like, the specific category of the question, but it would be nice to actually prep for them. I think the other thing that one of the things that I wanted to call out, Ryan, first of all, that's a very, very impressive score. And even if you were applying to business schools right now, and even if admissions had like no idea about classic GMAT and GMAT focus, they would still think that's an impressive score. I think that's a pretty good flex. Like if your score looks good in both classic and focus, I think that's a good flex right there. But I am curious, how do you guys feel about the score, like the weights and the score itself? I don't know how I think about it because I think the 690-ish, 650-ish score would reflect poorly if you were applying to an MBA. Of course, the percentiles clarifies everything, but I mean, you've worked with applicants before, and Naveen, you are applying to schools. Um, are you seeing, like, is it okay that the scores look different? Naveen, what do you think?
Well, it was my apprehension that like 695 or 705. I mean, but then you have to see that the admissions committee, they standardize the GPAs from different schools from different countries. So I hope that they know their stuff. And what I have heard that GMAT has also been, uh, approaching these schools and educating the admissions committee. That's what I have seen. But I don't think that it makes much of a difference
Sure.
because after January 2024, there will be just one exam.
Yeah.
So I won't read much into it because the people who are in this business, they know what is GMAT focus, they know what is classic GMAT, and the aspirants should not feel that okay, so should I go for GMAT focus or should I go for classic GMAT just because the score in GMAT focus is low. Okay, I don't think this is such a great reason. If you are good at font, DI, if you are not good at sentence correction, then only you can go for GMAT focus for the time being. So
Right.
I won't read much into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most admissions people would know where to look and know the new scale. So I hope it doesn't make much of a difference. I still wish they kept the score somewhat consistent, just as a shared language of speaking. Ajitesh, what do you think?
So I think they did need a different scale, but they couldn't make it too different. So obviously they had to have some continuity, but it had to be something that the schools would not make a mistake with. So I think they did the best that they could. And yeah, I agree with Naveen. So the tables that GMAC has released, I think schools would be aware of those, and they will not make a mistake with this. At least the good ones. I don't expect them. I don't expect this to be a problem.
So, Ryan, moving on to our last section, if you had to give a single piece of advice to people taking the GMAT focus now, what would your advice be?
I'd say probably take DI pretty seriously. I let my guard down on DI, looking for a new and exciting experience, but it ended up being the weakest side. And even, with Naveen's very similar performance in DI to mine, right? Like the percentiles are skewed pretty high. It's like they expect DI to be a pretty hard section, right? And so I'd say put a lot into to DI. It's not just the same as IR was. Data sufficiency is, in a lot of ways similar, but still very much not exactly the same. And there's something strange about having it on the IR section. So I wish I'd put more into DI, but I agree. Verbal preparation stays the same. Sentence correction is off the table. And problem solving, quant preparation, I think stays largely the same as it was before. maybe less focus on number properties than there used to be. Certainly no geometry. I didn't see any either. But aside from that, I think DI is the really like big newish thing. And so put some time into that. It's become a full member of the
Yeah.
test now in a way that IR wasn't before. And I think like honestly, a lot of companies have to catch up to that a little bit because we've also kind of put IR on the back burner this whole time. And I don't think the materials and practice stuff is as robust for that as it is for the more established quant and verbal stuff. So you may have to
Yeah.
seek it out, but prepare for DI.
Yeah, I totally agree. I never really cared much about IR because it was a separate score, but now we people have to actually treat it as a first class citizen. But also at the same time, I think there needs to be some over preparation needed for DI just because it kind of mashes a bunch of different sections together. Naveen, walk us through what your advice would be, but I would also, want a good summary of your DI strategy because you definitely work pretty hard on the DI stuff.
Yeah, actually, because in my mocks, I was not scoring that good or that consistent in DI. So I needed a strategy. What you want is, first of all, practice each type of questions. So I took this from MBA.com, this 200 question set that is available. So for practicing, because frankly, there was no material, there were no resources for DI. I was not able to find anything on internet because no one cared about IR. So, and I was giving the first day, first show. So I had to have some practice. So I would advise that you have to practice sufficient number of questions for each type of problem. Like MSR, do a bunch of MSR problems for TPA, for graphs and analysis. Data sufficiency, everyone knows because everyone has been preparing for data sufficiency. But here, what you want is because data sufficiency is a bit more familiar and it will take a lot less time as compared to MSR. So try to do that without using pen and without using any pen, because even the quant DS questions are also not calculated. So probably save some time in exam like environment, save some time and give that time to some PPA question to the MSR. Another thing is use that mark and review thing in the DI because it may just save you, because some of the questions in DI are tough in between, especially if you are doing it right. So the adaptiveness makes it a bit more tough. So some of the TPA questions, for example, uh, in my set were very tough, and there were some very different type of graphs that I encountered, which I haven't seen in last 4, 5, 6 years. Okay, the tree and leaves sort of graphs, and a lot of questions were asked on this. So yeah, so if you are not comfortable in any question, just mark and review that later. So yes, people do need to take DI seriously and have to have some strategy. I have also posted a GMAT Focus debrief on the GMAT Club, so probably people will be knowing that. So yeah, my advice will be this only: take the DI very seriously.
Awesome. I just linked the DI forum for people to check it out. It's still new. We're still building it out. So I want to make sure that we get to like all of the questions that were asked here. Um, Ajitesh, I'll let you take this one. Do we see any changes in the CR section and types of argument? My short answer is no, but I'm curious what you think.
No, so I was looking for question type.
Yeah.
Um, so that distribution is as expected. So we've got plenty of strengthen, weaken, assumption. I did get one boldface question. I know that a lot of people are interested in boldface questions. Look, boldface questions don't mean that your GMAT is going really well. But if anybody's interested in that, I did get one of those.
Me too.
I saw, yeah. So, so critical reasoning in
I
terms
got
of the
three
length of the
three
question,
boldface
we
questions.
were. Oh, you got three. Fair enough. So, yeah, in terms of the length of the question, I think we're good. In terms of the practice material that we have, I think we're fine. So I do have some concerns about each of the three sections, but in terms of CR, I think the practice material that you have would be good.
is plenty. I agree with that too. Experimental questions on the GMAT focus. I don't know if like GMAT has come out and said if there are any. I would be weirded out if there are no experimental questions, but it's hard to say which ones are and which ones aren't. So my general advice is never worry about experimental questions. But I'm curious, Ryan, do you have a different take?
Oh, no, I have not heard anything confirmed one way or the other, but I think there must be if they're going to continue making it an
Right.
adaptive test, right? Like, yeah, but I don't know anything about numbers of experimental questions. Like, it was pretty clear before. Actually, Ajitesh, you got an ESR, right? So you
That's right.
may be able to determine something about the like actual numbers of counted questions, because that's how we figured it out before. We saw that like the percentages in each quadrant on the ESR were all percentages that were like fractions of 7. And so we gathered, oh, there are 28 questions in quant. Out of the 31, 3 must be experimental. So you might have the best line on that, Ajitesh. Check it out.
So interestingly, the ESR is different now.
Is it?
They've got a question. Yeah, it goes question by question, not quarter by quarter.
Huh.
So right. So they let
Right,
question
right.
number one, did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? Which content area it was from? And that's where I was coming from when I said that I got 8 DS questions, of which 3 were non-math. They give
That
you
makes
that level
sense.
of detail, and they give you a per question time, like response time. So you have your average response time, but you have per question response time as well, which could help you if you're analyzing your test.
Gotcha.
They
That
give
is
you
very
something for
interesting.
every question? Sorry, just out of curiosity,
Yeah.
they gave you a report on like all 21 of the quant questions, for instance, not
Yes, yes,
differentiating between
yes.
experimental. No, okay, cool, good to know.
That is
Yeah, they
correct.
gave
But
everything.
but what you
Yeah.
so yeah, so what you said is absolutely correct. We have no idea which questions are experimental, which ones are not. But as you said, I strongly expect that there are experimental questions, because otherwise, how do you get the data to calibrate these, the next questions that you need for the GMAT?
Right. So,
Right.
one of the questions that I'm seeing here, Vamsi Chivukula, uh, that's something that I want to talk about. That uh, this new for GMAT Focus exam, there is an equal weightage to each and every section, and you can play that to your advantage. Because suppose if you are very good at quant, like I was, okay, and if you are just average in verbal, like I was, so what you can do is practice hard in quant and try to get as much as possible. Because in the earlier exams, there was either Q50, Q51, Q49. There was not much of a difference that a Q51 would make if your verbal was very less, right? But now, if you are getting 90 in quant and 80 to 83 in verbal, it's just the same if you're getting 19 verbal and 82 and 83 in quant, because all that matters is just the sum of your scale scores. And this is not a very scientific way of looking at things, because an 82 in verbal I got 79 percentile, and 82 in DI I got 94 percentile. How can you equate both? Ideally it should have been percentile to percentile you have to map, but this is the rules that we have to play with, and you can play this to your advantage. If you're good at suppose quant or verbal, try to maximize the score. Okay, try to maximize the score, because it won't be possible to maximize in other areas if you're short of time. So that's one advice that I would give to the aspirants.
That's an excellent point, Naveen. I do think that there are a lot of people like you, especially from Asia and India, who's traditionally their quant scores are off the charts, and they have to work harder on verbal scores. And as a result, like you get a 80 percentile in verbal, your net score goes down. I think their overall score is going to go up, which might actually push the GMAT scores to lower percentiles. So I'll be very curious to see what happens in the next few years of the GMAT focus. But that's an awesome insight. I also feel like straight away, like DI to me is closer to quant than it is to verbal. Just how I think about things. So considering DI, quant, verbal, all have one third of the weight to the test. The test is very skewed towards quantitative abilities than it used to be before. Ajitesh, you're nodding your head a little bit. Do you not agree with that?
So I don't know. We know that GMAC has said that they want DI to be balanced. They don't want it to be another quant section, but at the same time, they are measuring the same trait at the end of the day. So that's something that's common to each section. But I do want to introduce one data point, and that was something that I brought up a while back. My ESR says that 11 questions were math related and 9 were non math related. So I'm not sure what to make of this yet. I do agree that a lot of questions are definitely heavy on quant, but they may be trying to introduce more verbal questions. And I think what's going to happen is once they've had some time to run some of these questions through the test taking population, they'll have a larger pool of questions that they can provide to future test takers.
No, makes total sense. I would love to see some ESRs if you guys are willing to share. Like, what do I don't have any hobbies, so I can. So I would love to, and I'm very curious to order my ESRs. Cool. I think we are running towards the end of
Souvik,
the.
it's free. It's free. You'll get it along with your official score
Is
report.
it?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
why
it's
not?
free. Yeah, right.
Okay.
I've
Oh,
shared
so
my ESR on the GMAT club. I've shared my ESR in my prep that article.
awesome. That sounds great. Like I'm just gonna ask like someone in the moderator in the lobby for the live stream to add your debrief, Naveen. That's going to benefit everyone watching. Awesome, cool. I was scared to do this live stream today because it's Diwali and like a large chunk of Indian folks are celebrating. But I am a little sad to see how much GMAT Focus is top of mind on the Diwali night because we have a lot of people on the live stream. But this was fantastic. Thanks so much, Naveen, Ajitesh, Ryan, for joining us. What I really want to do is sponsor and evangelize more GMAT focus related content because I do think the change is meaningful enough to share resources with people who are preparing for the test. But thanks a ton for being here. This was an awesome session. Have a great rest of your day, and Naveen, have a great flight to Europe.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Souvik. It was very fun.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's a lot of fun.
Okay.